I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with a head to the side. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. It is our first game preview of the 2025 season. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers opener here on the road, taking on the Atlanta Falcons within the NFC South. We've got some action within the division to kick off the season the right way. Before that, we have some breaking news, some roster moves that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, at least this soon, but certainly a nice sigh of relief for people who are looking at that list of free agents for the Buccaneers headed into next offseason. Buccaneers handled some business. Excited to talk about that. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. We are back in the saddle, my friend. How you doing?
Pretty good. And yeah, I mean, look, first game preview of the 2025 season. So excited to get back into it. We ended up betting the Bucs drop this past week. So back into the rhythm of things, right? So excited to have football back, obviously, have had the opening game already happen. Then you got the whole slate, you got tonight's game, which we're recording this on Friday. And then you got the whole slate on Sunday. So yeah, football is officially in full swing, and happy to be back. And yeah, like you said, we also have, before we get into that, we do have some Buccaneers news.
Honestly, the two most imposing free agents that were on the list for the Buccaneers. There's a couple of other names, Mike Evans, Levante David. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think that these two guys, Luke Goedeke and Zyon McCollum, by the way, if you've been not caught up to speed on who we're talking about here, the Buccaneers have locked up some young talent to long-term extensions. The Goedeke news came out first. They locked down right tackle Luke Goedeke to a 4-year, $90 million extension with $50 million guaranteed. Averages out to about $22.5 million a year for the big right tackle. And Luke Goedeke, man, more homegrown talent for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is our resident glass eater, and this is very cool to see because, one, it locks down the other side of the offensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At the end of the day, you now have two anchors on each side both tackles that are considered well above average in the NFL. We know Tristan Wirfs is one of one, man. The first and only player in NFL history to be an all-pro at left and right tackle. Let's not forget that, but he's going to be a Buccaneer for a very long time. And now Luke Goedeke, for the next 4 years, is going to be anchoring the right side of the offensive line. He started as a guard, and that rookie season was just brutal. It was brutal enough for Luke Goedeke. That 2022 rookie season where he kicked over to right tackle. You didn't expect the transition to work out as well as it did. Here it is. He has certainly earned this contract. You love to see it for the big guy.
Oh, he certainly has. And look, I mean, that rookie season, it's all, the NFL is a lot about projection, right? And the draft is a lot about projection. And the Buccaneers kind of got it wrong when it came to the Luke Goedeke selection, picking him in the second round. They envisioned him as a guard. They moved him inside because he had played right tackle at Central Michigan. They moved him inside, and it just didn't really work. Was he just awful? No, but there was more bad than good, I would say. And then they move him back to his natural position. And at that point, you're like, okay, we'll see, right? Basically. And then 2023 was pretty encouraging. And then 2024 last year was really good. So, yeah, he's definitely earned it. And like you mentioned earlier about how the daunting, right? The daunting guys. Whereas, like, if Goedeke played, let's say, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about, the next deal. But if Goedeke had played this year, and let's say he plays this year the way he played last year, he could have been in line for even more money, right? So that's where you say the daunting ones, that those are tough guys to re-sign sometimes, especially tackles, who tackles are going to get paid, right? They're going to hit the market and they're going to get paid a lot of money. So Luke Goedeke is just a smidge above Taylor Moton, I believe now, about 22 and a half per season. That's what it averages out to. So yeah, the Bucs lock up their right tackle, and like you mentioned, is a good point you made, that both their tackles now long term for the next 3-4 years. You know who their tackles are going to be. So there is no question about that. And it's not like it's an average pairing. It's a pretty darn good pairing there for sure.
And I like that this consistency, this stability along the Buccaneers offensive line has almost become a mainstay for this franchise. You can look back at the last half decade, maybe even 6 years if you look at 2019, and this offensive line has been pretty well off. Obviously, the jury's still out on Charlie Heck kind of filling in on that left tackle spot here early on in the season, but you're going to have Tristan Wirfs back here sooner rather than later. And with him out there, especially him and Luke Goedeke playing their best, they are one of the better units in the NFL, so you love to see it. The other big deal that broke this week, the Buccaneers and cornerback Zyon McCollum reached agreement on a 3-year, $48 million extension. It includes $35.4 million guaranteed. So, Zyon McCollum, as you had mentioned in that Luke Goedeke explanation, in a very similar boat where this was a key contract year for him, so you have to imagine he's going to ball out. And if he plays the way that he did last year being a season where he played all 17 games, started all 17 games for the Buccaneers, and when you look back at the injuries in this secondary, having a guy that can start and play in all 17 games, and especially do it as well as Zyon McCollum has done, his development has been very, very, very nice to watch. But the fact that he's being rewarded for it now, if he has another season this year coming up like he did last year, I think this is a contract that can age well. But, do you think that he was on pace to maybe even outperform and be one of the more top paid corners? Because what is his annual right now? Right around 16?
It's about 16. Yep. So the deal is, 3 years, $48 million, about $35.4 million guaranteed. So, so it's a deal that the Goedeke deal, I think, is fair, and I think it's going to continue to be fair. The McCollum one could end up being a steal.
Yeah.
And obviously this season he was going to play on his rookie contract, so you can't really count this season as part of that deal. But it could end up being a steal, because if he continues to make a jump, right? If he continues to, let's say he gets busy, I think we can all admit, I think McCollum's first half of 2024 was better than his second. It wasn't like he was terrible in the second half. I thought he played a pretty strong first half and then sort of tailed off a little bit towards the end of the season. But I mean, if he can put together a full season like he did in the first half, and again, take another leap, I mean, you could be talking about a guy who on the open market, if he went out, would have gotten 20, 22, maybe $23 million, maybe. A guy, that athletic with that sort of size, if he plays well again, I mean, you could see, and obviously look, like, every contract could look bad or good depending on how they play, right? Like, if Luke Goedeke decides not to play well, the contract doesn't look as good. If he plays great, well, then, it looks great. But if McCollum plays well, I mean, that could be looked at as one of the best contracts in the entire NFL. If you're able to lock down, a corner who is not a shutdown guy, but like a good corner with the amount of money that corners are making nowadays on the market, being able to do that at $16 million for the next 3 seasons is pretty valuable. And it could end up being a pretty good value for the Bucs.
And I think where you're going to find out where you get that money's worth, and truthfully, what separates the good corners in the NFL from the great corners is the ability to take the football away. 2 interceptions last year for Zyon McCollum, and yes, this was a secondary unit as a whole that was starved for interceptions last year. Yes. I think as a team, they still finished with 7 or 8
I believe 7. 7 was
Oh,
more, yeah.
that's just
Very
absolutely
too low. Too low.
when you think about how far the scoring defense has fallen from the glory days of 2002 when they were winning championships on the back of their defense because they had linebackers, they had 3 different guys who could take it for a pick six any given week. You'd like to see them get hands on the football.
What was the number? Was it 8 touchdowns?
I think it was 9.
You challenged them to get nine touchdowns.
Yeah,
and it was they got 9 defensive touchdowns, and this group couldn't even get 7 interceptions, let alone touchdowns.
Yeah, man, it is a far cry from what it used to be. But I do think that a productive preseason, it's something that we talked about not only all off season with the goals and expectations for this unit headed into this upcoming season, but like throughout training camp and the preseason, you were seeing from Zyon McCollum and the younger guys, even some of the older veterans. Bryce Hall, I thought had a really, really good preseason. Good to see him back. But getting hands on the football, I think if Zyon McCollum can improve that statistic for himself this year, if he can, I don't think this is going to be a hot take, but if he can get like at least 5 interceptions this year, I think that's a fantastic season. And I think that is, I mean,
look, if he can, if he gets 4, that's double what he got last year.
Yeah, had 1 in the preseason.
Yeah, that's, if he's able to reach that number, I mean, you definitely take that. And look, I mean, yeah, McCollum was the team's best corner last year, right? And I think that the Bucs obviously they need a better year from Jamel Dean, right? Like they do. It's hard to mention McCollum and people not bring up Jamel Dean. Like I understand it, but they also need McCollum to take another jump though. Like I think they can't just have McCollum just stall out. I think he stalls out. He's a good player, but I think they believe there's another ceiling there. That there's another level that he can get to. And there was a very raw player when he was drafted, right? Very very raw, toolsy guy. So I think those typical those types of guys can typically sometimes have late sort of in their careers, obviously he's still in his early 20s, but like late in their career, year 3, year 4, year 5 is when they all put it together. And I think that's what the Bucs are hoping for when it comes to this, and especially this contract.
Yeah, it's going to be
interesting. It's kind of like in baseball. Sometimes you see that in baseball with arbitration and stuff. Like a team will sign a guy to like an 8-year deal and to like eat up all the arbitration years, and they're like, yeah, it might be like a little bit much right now, but you're hoping in a year or 2 that it's a bargain, you know.
It's an investment, and
Yes,
the Buccaneers
exactly.
investing in a couple of homegrown draft picks.
And again, checking it off early, not even having to worry about a second in the offseason. Literally, do not have to worry about that at all. So the other guy that they are looking to maybe re-sign was I almost said Chris Godwin, Cade Otton. So they were looking to re-sign him potentially as well. We'll see what ends up happening. I doubt something happens before the season starts. I think that was sort of the deadline for it, that they wanted to try and get something done, but we'll see.
I'm curious. We won't spend as much time here, but I am curious what ultimately ends up happening with the Cade Otton situation, because there is only so much money that can go around, and I think depending on how the season goes for Cade Otton, he could very well play himself out of the price range for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because there's only so much that can go around. And I think that checking off Luke Goedeke and Zyon McCollum at this point in the season, it sets things up to where I can see Cade Otton hitting the market, and I can definitely see him maybe ending up on another team if he has a strong season. I think he will have a strong season. He showed up last year when the Buccaneers needed him. He looks comfortable with Baker Mayfield under center as well. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think with everything that we have seen the Buccaneers do, especially under Jason Light, these long-term extensions, the guys that they invest in, the guys that they really put money down on, I feel like most of the time on the offensive side of the ball, the tight end is the odd man out. Like, they don't like to splurge a lot on tight ends. Cam Brate,
they re-signed Cameron Brate, but it wasn't like
he was always like
it was a chunk of money, but it wasn't like something huge.
Yeah, but he was like well outside, I think, the top 5 paid tight ends. It may be fringe top 10, top 15 money, and maybe that's even being generous. I don't know, but going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. Luckily, the Buccaneers lock up 2 young stars going to be good to see them in the red and pewter. All right, let's get into the injury front here before we break down this game. The Buccaneers on the road taking on the Atlanta Falcons, and only 4 Bucs have been ruled out for this game via head coach Todd Bowles. Offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs, wide receiver Chris Godwin, probably the 2 most shocking, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, just stunned.
Yeah, safety Christian Izien and cornerback Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison missed most of training camp and the preseason with this lingering injury, and week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, Todd Bowles didn't seem too concerned about his status for week 1, but it looks like he will miss this game. And as far as Christian Izien goes, looks like the Bucs are just going to err on the side of caution. The report is if it was a playoff game, if it was a gotta have it, this decides the year, he's going to step in and go. But, with the Buccaneers already short some massive talent, they don't see a lot of harm in letting Izien rest up a week, which I do think is the smart decision here.
Yeah, and another thing on Morrison, I think it's more so my read on it is that he could have played probably, but I think the team wants to wait a week because if you remember, like this guy did not participate in training camp basically.
Yeah, he was there for like a
didn't
week.
Really do much.
Yeah.
So didn't play in any of the preseason. So I think they want to get him another week under his belt. I think that's what it's more about rather than like, oh my God, he's not healthy. I think he's fine now, but I think that they are comfortable enough with their corner situation to not rush him out there. And so I would expect him to be good to go for next week. And I would expect Izien with as similar situation. Wirfs and Godwin still probably gonna be waiting a couple weeks though.
Defensive tackle Vita Vea is questionable for the game. Now, this is something else I wanted to talk to you about because I think there's a couple of storylines here along the defensive line when you look across the trenches at what Atlanta brings to the table. But back to Vita Vea. He was absent from practice all week, and this was a seemingly recent development with his foot injury. Not a lot of people knew exactly what was going on. He misses 1 day of practice. It's like, oh, okay. He misses 2 days of practice, and people start getting nervous. Anything more than that, I think there's a full-blown conspiracy. So he does participate today, and he is listed as limited for the game. I can imagine that a guy who is still 300-plus pounds in Vita Vea, if he is lingering with a foot injury, I'm sure they'd like to see him in action, but if they're going to be cautious with Christian Izien to this degree, where they're fine with him missing the game, I have to imagine Vita Vea may or may not be on a snap count, and you see a little bit more of Elijah Roberts there in the interior.
Potentially. I think in Vea's particular spot, you'd probably see more Greg Gaines and just in that nose tackle spot. I think so. It was described as more so like just a sore foot, kind of. Like not really like an injury, just kind of like banged up, bruised a little bit. Which, like you said, though, for a guy who's 300-plus pounds and going to be running at full speed against other grown men, not exactly going to be easy. So maybe they do have him on a snap count. I expect him to play. I think the Buccaneers expect him to play. He's trending in the right direction. He practiced today, so obviously, like you mentioned, it's a good sign. So yeah, maybe he is on a snap count, but I would expect him to be out there at least at the start of the game. We'll see how it goes then.
When you look along this defensive line, or really anywhere on this Buccaneers defense, I think this is where we can start. Are there any matchups that you're going to be looking for? Any key players? What are you looking for most as we get back into the groove of the regular season? Guys shaking off the ring rust, I think, goes without saying. But what else have you got circled here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you might see a little bit of that, right? A little bit of that rust. I think you saw a little bit of that in the Eagles Chiefs. Yeah, it was like the Chiefs game over here. Eagles Cowboys game. I think you saw a little bit of that, right? And I think you'll see a little bit of that throughout the first couple of weeks, especially when, look, I mean, teams don't really play their starters as much as they used to in the preseason, right? So this is kind of sometimes the starter's first action. So I do think you can see some of that. Now, I also think that when you were looking at the Bucs defense, if we're starting there, I think you're going to be looking at this pass rush. I think there's an opportunity against the Falcons offensive line for the Buccaneers to maybe have some success. I believe Caleb McGarry is not going to be in for this game. I think he might be out for the season. I could be wrong. Let me check that. But Elijah Wilkinson is going to be at right tackle for the Falcons, and he is going to be an X factor because he's going to be facing one of Hassan Reddick or Yaya Diaby for most of the game, and he's basically their backup right tackle. And I'm curious to see how the Buccaneers go about it. How quickly, if the four-man pass rush doesn't get there, right? Does Bowles be patient with it, or do you go to try and blitz? Which isn't a rookie quarterback on Michael Penix Jr., but it's a guy who lacks experience, right?
Mhm.
He only has a couple of starts under his belt. I'm curious to see how they go about that and how patient they are with the four-man pass rush. If it doesn't work right away, obviously Todd Bowles is still going to blitz. Like, just because we say, oh, if they improve the four-man pass rush, they're still going to blitz. And having an improved four-man pass rush will help you blitz. But I do wonder, like, if they can't get home, let's say in the first quarter, first half, do you get a little blitz happy? What ends up happening there? So I think that's a big storyline to watch, is like, how much faith do the Buccaneers have in their four-man pass rush that they tried to improve in the offseason?
Michael Penix is a different build of quarterback than Jaden Daniels, but when you think about the situation the Buccaneers had headed into week 1 of last season against Washington, I know they were playing at home, but you had an inexperienced quarterback who inevitably made it to the NFC Championship game, but in that moment, in that afternoon, it really seemed like the Buccaneers defensive front did a good job at mixing things up and quite literally showing him things he had never seen before, and he did not look ready for it. And I think with Michael Penix, yes, he did play a little bit at the tail end of last year, but he didn't play Tampa. And I think
Mhm.
that Michael Penix, like you had said, man, he's still at the stage where I think that they can affect him. I would like to see them affect him with 4 down linemen. As you had mentioned,
Yeah.
the injuries to not only their offensive tackle, but like the backup is hurt too. So they're,
Mhm.
quite literally using spare parts up there. And I just think that Hassan Reddick, Yaya Diaby especially, but development isn't necessarily linear, which is a line that I really like. I've heard that thrown around a lot. So I'm curious to see what happens with Yaya Diaby, but I don't want to put a ton on him this week.
Yeah.
He should perform, though. I mean, all things considered. I'm really looking at Hassan Reddick. Between the two of those guys, if they can make it happen by the third quarter, by the fourth quarter, if the Falcons are trailing and they're just consistently getting pressure or at least hitting the quarterback, I think it's going to go a long way. I think Penix, again, that inexperience factor, he's a lot different than Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins,
Mhm.
especially when he was hobbled, he knows how to stand in there in the pocket. He knows how to brace for pressure, and he knows how to carve up the Buccaneers. And I think Michael Penix is going to be good in the NFL. I just think that this Buccaneers defensive line, there's too many things there where at this point, I'm not saying there's no reason they shouldn't perform, because you also have to trust in the Atlanta coaches to game plan around what everyone else sees with, their lack of troops on the offensive line there. I don't see a lot of reasons why they shouldn't get to the quarterback here, man.
Well, and here's the other, interesting thing. Elijah Wilkinson, the right tackle, Michael Penix is left-handed, so that's his blind side.
Yeah.
So that's an important storyline here as well. That usually, you're talking about a quarterback, it's usually a right-handed guy, and you don't have to really worry about, you're looking at the left tackle, really. Well, when the quarterback's left-handed, it's the right. So I am interested to see that. Did a Q&A, 5 questions Q&A we do every week with a guy from the Falcoholic, which is SB Nation's Falcon site. And it was Savion Mixon was the writer's name. And he actually brought up an interesting stat here. The Buccaneers were actually 0-3 in games last season where they blitzed under 25%. And both the two of those 3 losses were against Atlanta. So the Buccaneers were
Mm.
actually trying not to blitz against the Falcons last year. They were trying to get home with 4, and they simply couldn't. And we know that Kirk Cousins both times carved them up, right? So I do think that I think the Bucs are going to want to keep that number, maybe not for the whole game, right? But I do think they're going to want to try and get a pass rush of 4 guys, because I think ideally you do that. But that also goes to show you that they had trouble winning without blitzing. Like they just had trouble finding success without blitzing. So hopefully they're able to get to a 4-man rush. I am looking closer at Hassan Reddick than I am Yaya Diaby, just because look, Hassan Reddick is out to prove something. They paid him, you know, it wasn't a long-term deal, but it was significant money. I mean, $14 million isn't nothing. They went out and they got him, and they are expecting him to make an impact. So hopefully he can do that early and often. And like you mentioned, if the Bucs, let's say they have a 7-point lead, a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, and the Falcons are in obvious passing downs, that's where I'd like to see these pass rushers pin their ears back and just go, kind of, right? Make a play to end the game. Don't keep Atlanta in it. Don't let but it was 24-14. Now it's 24-17. Oh, now Atlanta's got the ball back. No, make it the play, have a big third down sack or a big strip sack, some type of impact play there without rushing for.
Take the ball away. Take the ball away. We can talk about hitting the quarterback all day, but even if you can get pressure to affect a young quarterback like Michael Penix, that's enough to have him, toss out a duck. And Tyke Smith comes down with it. Couple of young guys in the lineup here for the Buccaneers defense. Servassier Dennis going to be in that linebacker spot. I assume we're going to be seeing a lot more of Tyke Smith in that strong safety spot without Christian Izien now in the lineup. And then Antoine Winfield Jr., hoping to see him return to form, as he should be healthy headed into this one. We just talked about Zyon McCollum at the start of the show. Jacob Parrish going to be your nickel corner. I think that there are guys all over this defense, specifically a lot of those names that I just mentioned in the secondary. It feels like they have reworked the defense just enough over the offseason. They have supplemented the talent in necessary places. I just want to see it come together, especially when you consider that Kirk Cousins basically threw for 1,000 yards on the Bucs last year in the 2 games that they played. I would like to see this defense just come out and kind of, come out and set the tone early. Either put Penix on his ass or take the football away. I want to see some splash plays in the first half from this defense.
That is something that still kind of concerns me of like, okay, it's a different quarterback, but like it's the same, system, like Zach Robinson. Like, one thing that does concern me is like, what if Zach Robinson's system just like tears Bulls up, Like, I mean, we've seen it, right? Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, maybe it's a matchup. Yeah. At that point, you have to beg the question.
So that's one thing that does concern me of like, maybe it's just it's an X's and O's thing, like Bowles' scheme, just, Zach Robinson and those types of schemes just find ways to sort of tear it apart. And hopefully, Michael Penix Jr. doesn't go out there and throw for 400 yards, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. I do, again, think there's going to be a point of emphasis, though, on trying to get there with 4 guys. I don't think they're just going to want to blitz, and I think they're going to try their best to get there with 4. But I just hope if they don't succeed, you got to pivot at some point. Like, you got to do something different. You can't just try and, fit the square peg into a round hole. And you got to try and find a way. So we talked about the pass rush a long time. I think it's because it's really important in this game. And I think the reason they lost those 2 games to Atlanta and Kirk Cousins was able to throw for as many yards as he did is because he had too clean of pockets. Like the pockets were just simply too clean. And I mean, Kirk Cousins isn't really a mobile guy. Michael Penix, I wouldn't describe him as like a Jaden Daniels, but he can move.
Yeah. He can get out of dodge if need be.
Yes.
He can make exactly. He can make a play happen.
He can improvise.
Yep.
Yeah, he can improvise. So I am curious to see how the pass rush looks, because again, that's something we talked about all offseason that they needed to fix, and I'm curious to see how that looks. Even though they only added really 1 guy as a starter, but I think that one dude might be able to make a pretty big difference.
One more name here on the defense before we talk about the offensive side of the ball. Just another note on Servassier Dennis. I am curious to see where he is at. I think this is a really good benchmark test for him because, in a sense, he's kind of got his hands full when you consider what a lot of his assignments are going to be. If he's out in coverage, maybe he's lining up against, Kyle Pitts. How much of a mismatch is that going to be? I know most people are going to say Pitts has largely been disappointing, but he's good against Tampa. He finds ways to get open against the Buccaneers twice a year. So I'm curious to see if Servassier Dennis can handle it in that aspect. And then behind that, you've got, some potent running backs. Bijan Robinson, one of the fantasy football darlings, arguably top 5 guy in the league. And then Tyler Algier still, who at this stage of the game, man, in the past he has been a buck killer. So I can't ever, count him out of any given game. I think if Servassier Dennis can show up, help this team in run support, and then help lock down Kyle Pitts, that'd be a really great start to the season for him as well, and give a lot of people faith in that linebacker position.
And also another thing, and look, I mean, one of the things that I think sort of exposed that the Buccaneers had a really bad linebacker issue last year was that first Falcons game in Atlanta. The middle of the field was just constantly wide open, constantly. KJ Britt did not have a good day, and it was pretty rough, right? It was pretty rough, and I think that's where you look at Servassier Dennis, and he's somebody who again was hurt, in that did not play, so. That's a guy who the Falcons, haven't really accounted for per se. They hadn't seen last year. I think he could be an X factor in this game. I think he could be a guy who could make a difference. If we're talking about two X factors on the defensive side of the ball, I would say Hassan Reddick and Servassier Dennis, both players the Falcons did not face when they played the Buccaneers last year.
Let's take a look at the other side of the football here. This Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, first game of the regular season for new offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard. Grizzard the Wizard. How do we think this offense is going to look here? There's obviously a lot to like on paper when you look at this Buccaneers offense. I know that at certain positions they come in a little short-handed. No Jalen McMillan. He's going to miss at least the first half of the season. Hopefully we see him at some point before the postseason. But, that's unfortunate, the injury to him in the preseason. We know that they're without Chris Godwin, so when you look to this passing game, the names that you're looking at are Mike Evans, who we know Mike Evans, and we know he's going to be just fine against Atlanta. He usually is. Emeka Egbuka. Do you think this is one of those games where the Buccaneers really try and stick to the run and try and play conservative and just play smart depending on the pace of the game? Or do you expect them to get, really Egbuka in particular? We know that Mike Evans is going to get his to some degree. How quickly do you expect them to get Egbuka involved here?
I think he's going to be a big part of the game plan. I think he's going to take a similar role that Godwin had last year before he went down. And again, I don't think he's not gonna be Chris Godwin, per se. But I do think they're not gonna have training wheels on him. I think they're gonna expect him to get ready to go. The Falcons defense is not particularly good last year, but again, it was just a storm of everything that was circumstances wise for the Buccaneers last year when playing the Falcons was just brutal.
Yeah.
The Bucs played the Broncos week 3 in a Tampa Heat. They played the Eagles week 4 in even hotter Tampa Heat. And then they go on the road to Atlanta on a short week, and they end up playing the Falcons. They lose that game. Then the second time it comes around, the game before that, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both get hurt. They're both not playing in that game, so the Buccaneers have Ryan Miller and Raheem Jarrett actually played in that game. Cade Otton caught 2 touchdowns. Cade Otton's actually done pretty well against the Falcons in his career. Caught that late touchdown in 2023 in Atlanta to sort of cement the division there. Had 2 touchdowns against them last year, but I don't think they're gonna be let's just ease them into it. I think they're gonna look at Emeka Egbuka as a wide receiver too, and if the dude's open, a dude's open. And I also don't think they're gonna just try and pound the rock either. I think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna ignore the run, but I think they want to air it out too. You look at it, they don't have Godwin, they don't have McMillan, but when you still have Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka, Sterling Shepard is still there as the wide receiver 3. He's a serviceable wide receiver 3. You have Cade Otton, who, was sort of questionable coming into the week. Pretty clear now he's going to be able to play. He's going to be good to go. When you have those guys, that's more than enough, to be able to do some damage. So I think the biggest thing for the Bucs is sort of similar to the Falcons. The tackle situation, right? How does Charlie Hicks hold up? And I think that might be the thing that determines this game. Which backup tackle holds up better? I think when you look at it at Sunday at 4:30, when we know the result of the game, I think you're going to look at it and it feels like the winner of this game is going to make an impact play because the backup tackle for whatever team came up short on maybe just one play, whatever, came up short at some point, and it made a difference.
I'm curious to see how they can run the football with Charlie Heck
Yeah.
out there at left tackle. I don't think it's going to be that drastic of a difference when you have such a capable back like Bucky Irving, who again I think is another big key in this game for the Buccaneers offense. But what if they just can't run the ball? You know what I mean? Like what if we get 3-4 drives, we're halfway through the second quarter and it's very apparent, okay, this isn't working. How much faith do you have at that point in Baker to just kind of let it rip around the yard? As you said, still a very talented and serviceable wide receiver room, but definitely trial by fire for a guy like Emeka Egbuka if all of a sudden Bucky Irving and this offensive line can't keep things consistent and stable whenever they have the ball in their possession.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm curious to see how they use it. I think having Kate Otten healthy helps because, again, like we talked about him, he sort of acts sometimes as an extra blocker. Like last year when the Bucs were without Luke Goedeke, like he acted as like an extra blocker, and it worked like for the most part. Like, obviously it's not going to be as good, but like it worked well enough, So, and the thing is like the Bucs, like, and they didn't even run that bad against the Falcons in the first one, at least. Rashad White in the first game last year in Atlanta had 10 carries for 72 yards. Bucky Irving had 9 carries for 44 yards. Unfortunately, Bucky Irving did have the big mistake, which was the late fumble, which would have put the game away, gave the Falcons some life, ended up costing them. And then in the second game, it's kind of tough because Baker Mayfield did throw the ball 50 times in that game, but Bucky Irving was still nine carries for 44 yards. I think it's the exact same stat line. So, like I said, that's a 4.9 average. That's good. If you're averaging almost 5 yards a tote, I mean, that'll work. So they had some success running the ball against Atlanta last year when they did it. So I am curious to see how Charlie Heck being there, not Tristan Wirfs, how that impacts things, the way they run, and also with the new offensive coordinator, right, with Josh Grizzard, how does that work? I think the concepts are going to be similar to last year, right? I don't think you're going to see, oh my God, this is a brand new, I've never seen this before offense. I think you're going to see similar stuff.
Yeah. No,
That's one of the reasons why the Buccaneers promoted from within. They wanted to keep it similar. So I don't think you're going to see just something, out of the blue and, oh my God, what is this? So we'll have to wait and see how it is. And I'm curious to see how Grizzard is as a play caller, right?
Yeah.
What are the adjustments at halftime? We talked last year, especially down the stretch, about the defensive adjustments at halftime that Bowles was making. It was really good. I'm curious to see if something's not working in the first half, how does Grizzard react to it after he's seen what the Falcons are throwing at him? What do they do then?
Yeah, another thing on the offensive side of the ball here. I feel like throughout the course of this season, we're going to be talking a lot about this Buccaneers rookie draft class. So another rookie that we're going to be bringing up on the show today. Many people excited to see this guy in action. Tez Johnson, man, made the final 53-man roster. Took a slew of injuries and everything else, but one of the fan favorites from this draft class is able to make it. My question to you: Week 1, everything is fresh still, and we know that he is going to contribute to some degree in the kick return / punt return game between him and Sean Tucker. I think are kind of our two guys that they're going to throw back there. Are we going to see Tez Johnson in this offense at all? Do you think there's room for him to, maybe try and catch a few passes here and there, or do we keep that in our pocket until later in the year?
I mean, I do think he might get some snaps just because, again, like the Bucs are going to be down 2 wide receivers.
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't shock me if he got some snaps. It is interesting. I think Cam Johnson was listed on the first like depth chart they do. Cam Johnson was listed, I think, as the primary kick and punt returner. So that would tell you that, they like him a little bit better in that spot. So if Tez Johnson isn't going to be kicking or, kicking, yeah, he's going to be kicking. If he's not going to be returning kicks or punts, well, then maybe he does get in for, a play or two here or there. I think, again, you talk about, oh, you don't want to, sort of unload your entire tool chest. I
Yeah.
don't think you have to. At the same time, though, this isn't like a preseason game. Like this, you're trying to win this game. So, look, if you think something that Tez Johnson can do can help you out there and get you a big play, get you a spark play, go ahead and do it. Like I don't think you're in a position where you got to save anything. I think, especially as week one, it's a divisional opponent, a team that swept you last year. You got to go all out. And if Tej Johnson helps that, he helps it.
Yeah, I know we've talked about like defensive touchdowns and interceptions and a lot of big splash plays with this one, but I would love to see Tez, just with like a big time punt return. I hope I'm not asking for too much. I don't want to say anyone's going to crack a return or anything like that for a touchdown, but I'd love to see him just like he did in the preseason. You remember, that it really amped everybody up, and I know it was just preseason, but it feels like it's been so long since we've had a consistent returner. We've had some guys that show flashes every now and again, but then it's like, they show a flash one week and then they're running sideline to sideline on the next week and losing 2 yards on the punt return. So it was, we went through a lot of nobodies. Like the year that we won the Super Bowl. This is a good trivia question. Do you remember our primary returner the year that we won the Super Bowl?
Was it Devin Tompkins?
It was not. Well, maybe for a little bit, but there was another guy that they had back there, and if I'm not mistaken,
is it a receiver?
No, he was on the depth chart, if I remember correctly, as a running back.
Oh boy, that's a good one.
It's a name, dude. It's a name. And I used to get pissed every time I saw him back there because I thought we had way more capable people, like Devin Tompkins.
Is it Kenyon Barner?
It's Kenyon Barner. Do we have the? Yes. There's this week's trivia question.
There we go.
Anything?
He went to Oregon. He was good at Oregon.
Yeah, he was. And I remember he had a couple of returns, but I also remember distinctly that I think it was that Rams game. Was that a Monday night or a Thursday night game?
It was Monday. The Rams game was Monday night.
Yeah, they were playing in the pewter uniforms, and I remember he like muffed a return or something, and I was at that game, and I was just so disappointed. I was like, get this guy the hell out of here. I'm sick of seeing him in the backfield. Torrey Cox, good deep dive. Richard T. He was thinking 02 season. That's an old name, man. All right, so let's get into some game predictions here. We've covered the defense. We've covered the offense. We've covered a little bit of special teams. We've yet to mention our guy Money Mac, but I've got every ounce of faith that Chase McLaughlin, when faced with the NFL's toughest battles, will continue to kick the wall down the way that he does and the way that he has. That's our guy Money Mac, man. He's ice cold. Sure. What more is there to say? I think he could be another key piece for the Buccaneers this week. Not a lot of people, I think, spend enough time talking about the impact of a kicker. But I think when you have a good kicker, you don't have to spend time talking about having a good kicker.
Right. That's It's kind of like offensive line, like individual offensive linemen. If they're good, you won't hear their name as much. If you have a good, consistent kicker, you don't need to talk about the kicker.
Gonna see Riley Dixon making his regular season debut for the Buccaneers at punter. Hopefully, you don't see him too much. But it'd be curious to see how he performs. This is at this stage in the game, with the track record the Bucs have had at punter over the last, 4 or 5 years. At this point, it's got to work. Like there's no reason it shouldn't. This guy's a veteran. He's seen a thing or two in the NFL. He had a pretty good preseason in camp as well. So as long as he can just keep a level head and punt like a normal NFL punter, just like Money Mac, we won't have to talk about it, But important to note that this is his regular season debut.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Bucs paid him legit money, right? Like I said, I think I mentioned this on a podcast earlier that like this wasn't like some UDFA that they're trying to find a diamond in the rough and oh my god, they found this guy out of nowhere. Like no, like they paid a veteran, so you hope that he goes out there and is able to to do well. The preseason was a strong showing. Hopefully it can carry over.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into some game predictions here and wrap this thing up, my friend. I think that, we've talked a lot about the positive matchups and the positive scenarios for the Buccaneers in this game. Again, looking for a lot of production from this pass rush in particular. just because of the weaknesses on the other side for Atlanta. But especially in a division game, when things are almost too good to be true, sometimes they can be. And I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are going to struggle, but as we know, these NFC South games, these division games can get very sticky. Look at Dallas and Philly from the other night. It was very back and forth.
Look, if CD Lamb is able to catch a couple of balls, Dallas might win that game.
You're not. It's unfortunate that you're not kidding, but yeah, it really did come down to that. I think the Buccaneers have a nice back and forth contest here. I do think we get a defensive takeaway. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. And I think that's going to be the difference. You brought up that backup left tackle situation, which is a very good point, but I think that the turnover battle is something to keep in mind as well. Baker Mayfield going to want to come out with a clean slate, not going to want to turn the ball over here. Nobody on the offense wants to turn the ball over, obviously. Those are plays that lose you football games. But I think the Buccaneers defense, I think they just want to take one from Atlanta here. They got bullied last year, and I don't think it's going to happen again in 2025. I have the Buccaneers winning. I don't want to say a last-second field goal, but I do think they win this one by 3 points. I'm going to go Buccaneers 24, Atlanta 21.
Okay. Look, I agree with you about Atlanta, or I should say the Tampa Bay versus Atlanta. The Bucs want to get that taste out of their mouths, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you get swept by a divisional opponent, especially the opponent like you were competing with, for the NFC South title. Like I think if it's not the Bucs that's going to win the NFC South, it's probably going to be the Falcons. Like that's probably going to be the case. So these games are ultra important, right? Week one, you always want to start off on the right foot, but it's a divisional road game against a team that swept you last year. You don't want to start off 0-1. And I do think the Buccaneers are the better team. But look, I thought the Buccaneers were the better team last year, too. Like I said, I think some circumstances helped the Falcons, especially in that Week 8 game, more so than that Week 5 game. Week 8 game, playing that game without it was also on a short week because the Bucs played Monday night against Baltimore, then played 6 days later on Sunday without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think Jalen McMillan might have missed that game, too. I'm not 100% sure, but there was a lot of stuff, right, that went wrong for the Buccaneers against the Falcons. And I do think that the Buccaneers will get their revenge this Sunday. I do think it's going to be a close game. I don't think this is going to be a blowout either way. I think Bucs fans are probably going to be grinding on their teeth a little bit here, biting their nails at times. I also have this as a 3-point game. I have the Buccaneers winning this game 26-23 over the Atlanta Falcons. Start out the year 1-0 for the 4th straight year in the Bulls era. That would mean that the Bucs have started off 1-0 every year in the Bulls era. They've started off 1-0 every year since 2021. 2020 was the last time that they started 0-1. Scary thing about 2020 was that was the last time they were on the road against a divisional opponent to open the season. So they're on the road against a divisional opponent this time again, but I don't think they're going to lose this game. I think it's going to be close, and I think it could go either way, but I think the Buccaneers are the better team. And again, I think they're going to be a team that wants to get that taste out of their mouths and wants to beat the Atlanta Falcons.
Hey, well, you mentioned it. If we want to start doing the mental gymnastics now, if the Bucs lose this game, then just look back at the last division game that they lost in week 1 on the road. Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, 2002.
Look, the Bucs have never won a Super Bowl in a year where they started 1-0. I'm just saying.
You are correct.
Never won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, you beat me to it. So you are correct. With that being said, my friend, I think that's going to do it for this week's game preview. Very excited to be back.
That's also you'll 100% hear that from me post game if they lose on Sunday. Well, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It would certainly make
no, but really, I'm sure fans will act like it's the end of the world. But
this team's terrible.
This
team's terrible. We're injury ridden. We can't shake it. We're dead in the water.
Can you
fire
imagine
Jason Light?
If we were doing the podcast week 1, 2015, with Jameis versus Mariota and how that game played out. Oh my God. I don't even
man.
I wasn't really I was on social media because I was doing the page and stuff, but I wasn't on social media like I am now.
Yeah.
I can't even and also social media wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but I can't even imagine
It was a
what
different
our chat and the phone calls would be. I can't even imagine.
it was a different time for sure. God, I can't believe that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Crazy.
I remember sitting down on my couch, getting ready. I'm like, that's our rookie quarterback, man. That's Jameis Winston.
And
That's
pick six.
yeah, that pass is intercepted.
Cody Sensible.
Oh my God, man. That's a name. Huh? How about a name?
Yeah.
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 All right, folks, we appreciate you for hanging out with us. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneer news and content. Thank you to everybody in the live chat for hanging out with us tonight as well. Drop some score predictions, and I'll read those before we get out of here. Richard T. from the West Coast. Go Bucs 1911, nothing. Rolf Steinbauer. I think I need to learn to say that correctly. I think it's Steinbauer. Eddie Nash and our good buddy MK. Appreciate you guys checking in with us. We always appreciate you. Matt Diaz as well checking in with us. Another longtime member of the Cannon Fire crew. You guys are always appreciated, and your support means the world to us. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_Daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. Check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Richard T. says Bucs 27, Atlanta 26. Eddie Nash says Bucs 30, Atlanta 24. Evan, do you have anything on BucsNation.com this week to get people ready for the Falcons?
Yeah, we got the 5 questions with Savion Mixon of the Falcoholic. Get you sort of on the Atlanta side of things, right? I ask him some questions. He answers them, so to get more perspective from an Atlanta side. Then also going to have the Bucs X Factor out. So what is the one player the Bucs kind of need to step up in this game in order to win? So stay tuned for that and all the other great content we have out on BucsNation.com as well.
Go Bucs 1911 says 31-17 Bucs, and our good friend Mikey Kelly is picking the Bucs in this one. What a shocker. Bucs 48, yeah, Falcons stunned. 10.
Okay.
And then, honestly, a Luke Goedeke-like stat line here for Servassier Dennis, courtesy of Richard T. He says, Servassier Dennis with 10-plus tackles, 1 sack, and 1 interception. That's an all-pro performance for Servassier Dennis. If he can do half
that
of
might get him player of the week, that's for sure.
Yeah, if he can do half of that, I think he's going to have a good career here.
Yeah, I think the Bucs could be playing the Monstars, and Mikey Kelly would still be like, "Yeah, it's gonna be a 30-point game." Like, duh.
Bucs by 30. It's the brand, man. It's the brand. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And if you are fiending for more football content or Buccaneers conversation, check out the latest episode of the Rondé Barber Show. We had former head coach John Gruden on, and listen, just to hear Rondé and Gruden chop it up, man, is really great stuff.
Yeah,
it's just good old natured football conversation. I don't know how else to put it, but it is worth the listen, and we got a lot of great stuff planned. That show going to be returning next week on Wednesday, so check it out, the Rondé Barber Show on podcast platforms. And right here on YouTube. We appreciate you, folks. We will talk to you in the next one. Don't forget, the next one being Sunday afternoon. We are going to be live. Now, we should be live taking phone calls. I'm not like 100% on that, but we should be. Let's just say that, like, 99.
We're gonna be live. We're gonna be live regardless.
Oh yeah. We're gonna be live. Yeah. 100% chance that we're live, 99.9% chance that we're going to be taking phone calls. But you should be there. And if you're not, you are what the kids call a square. So we look forward to it. We will see you Sunday as soon as the game ends right here at youtube.com/cannonfirepodcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.